He's a wonderful colorist, and I think you'll get a lot out of everything that we've talked about this semester with figure, working with chiaroscuro, with values, color mixing. He has all of it. So welcome, Chris. Thanks.
All right, thank you all for coming. Can everyone hear me? That sounds good. I'm going to start with a couple of works that I did as an undergraduate student. Let's just go through my work and a few of my influences. So here's I'm working subtractively. So I'm starting with a compressed charcoal wash and going in with a kneaded eraser to find the lights, trying to create just mood and atmosphere. Trying to find like a timeless spiritual sensibility in the work, speaking towards human origins with the clay pot, ancient relics with the bricks, wanting to portray something that was lost maybe. And this other work is invented figurative exploration inspired heavily by Picasso. I think you could still be inspired. You could still be inspired by Picasso back in the 90s. I don't know if that's still cool now. One thing that isn't apparent from the image is how much I worked and reworked the color in this. I don't know how successful it is, but I did spend 2 to 3 years revamping and fine-tuning the color to the best of my ability to create a harmony. This also depicts sort of an idealized situation, a man and woman in a simple environment, pre-technology. Playing, and also a little bit of sense of humor. If you see the shape between the legs of the guitarist, like a Freudian little shape there. And that was inspired by the Pipes of Pan by Picasso. I think I was really intrigued by the clarity of the forms that he was creating in these works, and the space that he was achieving. And that was something that I wanted to try to get with my work. And I think also his investigations of classical art is something that I was very interested in. I think I'm still interested in that to this day. Here's another example, a little playful use of the handstand, kind of working semi-automatically in a way. It's like something that would pop into my head and I would put it into the composition. Also really interested in shapes, the clarity of the geometric shapes working together, trying to compose a very balanced composition. And after undergrad, I got interested in doing graphite renderings. I was doing really simple arrangements of nuts and other natural objects generally. Still interested in composing, finding a rhythm of going across the page, trying to find a nice sense of light, rhythm. Really interested in the walnuts too. I thought that was very fascinating how it made me think that natural objects aspire to be geometrically perfect. And I think you see that in nature, but they're always rumpled by the forces of chaos. That's how I always like to describe it. And here's another example, leaf and pop top. I think this is an example of me trying to incorporate more current ideas, like ideas of the environment, pollution, and that type of thing. And that's what composed my graduate school portfolio. That's what I applied to graduate school with, these graphite renderings and the invented figural compositions. And when I got to Northwestern, this was the first drawing I completed. Professor Valerio introduced me to the work of Antonio Lopez Garcia, an incredible artist. If you're not familiar with him, I highly recommend looking him up and looking at his work. But he would do room drawings, and I remember he showed me the book, and I just looked down, and I remember my heart started pounding, and I just thought, wow, this is possible. So I went out and tried to do my own room drawing. This is what I came up with. I really learned a lot through the drawing, a lot of hard work, probably about 300 hours in this thing. Really observing, taught me to observe a lot closer. Valerio talked to me about he taught me the lesson of the wall. That's how I call it in my mind, how light fades down a wall. For those of you who are interested in perceptual issues in art and drawing, take a look at light falling on a wall and look how subtle those value structures are. You can really learn a lot about perception doing that. And it clued me into how light kind of fades down planes of all form. and it really heightened, really upped my game in terms of perception. Playing compositional games again with the slats of the chair, the slats of the banister. The slide's not very good. You can barely see the slats of the radiator in the far background. And also playing with the footprints and the grunginess of the floor was a lot of fun. And here was the second drawing in that series. I kind of cleaned it up in here, right? It's no longer the grunginess. It's getting a little bit more clear. And that's where my, ultimately where my body of work would end up. It's very clear. It's very pristine. The Native American blanket I included from one of the many critical essays that I got at Northwestern, talking about the comfort of myth. That's what I remember it being described as. And I used to be very much interested, and I still am, very interested in Joseph Campbell and comparative mythology, using that as a tool for developing narratives and symbolism. But the idea of using it as a comforting device I thought was intriguing, so I included the blanket in the drawing. And apparently my suitcase is packed, so I'm going somewhere. I'm going into this dark, unknown room of my new art career. Got a little skull, and the little tiny skull is that white dot in the background there. And then even further fine-tuning my rendering of the wall, like really getting into that subtle gradation. That was one of the first critique I had at Northwestern. I presented the room drawings, and I also did some figurative compositions, invented figurative compositions in the vein that I was working with, the work I showed earlier. And those works got roasted at critique. It was just a horrible experience. So I went back to the drawing board, and actually I thought about this earlier, but I was going to do bowling trophies. And the bowling trophy is pretty much where my work is now. It's pretty much the root of all my work, my whole life. The inspiration to use bowling trophies came from seeing them at a thrift store, because I used to go to thrift stores a lot to look for old still life objects, nice worn things. I saw the bowling trophy, and I thought, man, wouldn't it be hilarious to do a photoreal painting of a bowling trophy? And so I ended up doing it, and I thought about why I thought it was funny. And the first thing I thought about was its relationship to classical art. It's in a quasi-athletic pose. It's monochromatic. And so that was the main thing I thought about. And also the whole idea of trophy is funny in and of itself, right? As it relates to art. And painting art becomes sort of a trophy of thought for the artist. Paintings especially, art objects, but paintings especially, become trophies for collectors. So it nods towards the commodification of art. The idea of winning and competition is kind of part and parcel of our whole capitalist society. So all that was wrapped into it. Amid all these ideas, I include self-portrait in the convex bowl, shirtless, which makes my physique even less flattering. So it talks about ideas of deflation. So I want to deflate all these ideas, and I think that's a recurring theme throughout all the work that you'll be seeing, is this idea of deflating these high-minded ideas. Sometimes high-minded ideas, other times deflating just ideas of winning and being the best. And the one thing that came up during the critiques was the ideas of identity, masculine identity specifically. And so I follow that up with balloon trompe-l'oeil, which I arranged in a sort of Dali-esque phallic symbol. Had a lot of fun with that. And you see obvious ideas of deflation. I'm playing with color here because the deflated balloon is red, which is traditionally the color of celebration and amorous virility or whatever. I don't know if that's virility. But the full balloon is black, so the abyss, evil, dark intentions. And again, I'm incorporating my reflection in there, in the convexing. But here I'm kind of staring into the abyss, which is kind of a fun play. And it's acknowledging my participation in all these issues that I'm trying to critique. I think that's an important part of it. Is man a pawn? The use of the bowling trophies made me think of, hey, army men. they're like little classical sculptures too. Maybe I could use them. So I went and got some army men and started working with them. At first, these were always much smaller. I've done a few larger plastic figure paintings, but generally I like to work smaller. So the title "Is Man a Pawn" is kind of common throughout my work. This idea of a real broad concept, right? This dramatic "Is man a pawn" offers this far-reaching existential question. I want the viewer to be able to bring their own baggage to it. I want it to be accessible. I do want my work to be democratic. You know, I don't want it to be too elusive or obtuse. I do want it to be accessible. I thought it was interesting that the first painting in the series includes the chess piece, because I'm playing games in a certain way, right? I'm arranging these things. I arrange them on the white plane with the monochrome background. It becomes like a metaphysical arena in which I can play. So I'm playing with form and color, but I'm also playing with meaning. Also becomes a combination of figure painting, still life painting, and landscape painting. This was from a show I did in 2002 in New York called Dreams. So I was hanging objects over the figures as a simple metaphor for dreaming. And here we've got the bullet hanging over the George Patton figure. And that plays with scale, right? So they're both at life size, but since the plastic figure's obviously miniature, it creates the illusion like there's a man standing underneath a giant bullet. He's dreaming of this giant bullet, which is a big part of what war is, right? There's a megalomania about it. And I've arranged it in a certain position to indicate a Freudian, the erect penis and all that, having fun with that. And also the figure itself, I got those at a store called Uncle Fun in Chicago, where a bunch of wonderful little plastic knickknacks. But these general figures are like the perfect form for me. They got the exact right amount of detail, that sort of subtle yellow-green color. It's just a very beautiful, fun to paint. And that's what's one of the fun things about the plastic figures is that they're almost like lumps of paint as it is. So they're like ready. The transposition into paint's a very natural one. Oh, and they're inspired by Cotan. I forgot to mention that. So I included, if you're not familiar with Cotan's work, the Spanish monk from the 1600s, he would hang vegetables and fowl and different things in this kind of stucco windowsill, which becomes like a metaphysical environment. So, I remember seeing him as an undergrad, so I'm sure he had quite an influence on me and my aesthetic. Again. Eve, this is the first painting where I incorporated the Fisher-Price figures. I mentioned classicism is something I'm interested in. Not just the trophies resembling sculptures of antiquity, but the process of refining the forms, refining the plastic figures to make them a little bit more perfect. I'll always correct anatomical problems that I see in the figures, so I'm kind of idealizing them and trying to make them more heroic as well. But along those lines, when you think of Greek sculpture, you'll hear a lot about ideas of canons of proportion, right? They would try to find the perfect form to represent the nobility of man, of humankind. The Fisher-Price people have a similar, they have a canon of proportion, right? They have to have that right relationship. And of course, the spherical head and the cylindrical bodies are clearly mathematically derived. And also the idea of deflations here, right? Kind of looking at the old Genesis myth and kind of bringing it down to this miniature level. And I did several of these little 2.5-inch square busts of the Fisher-Price people back in the early aughts. And this one in particular, I showed this one because the nostalgia that's wrapped up in these paintings is also pretty evident, and that can really spark a lot of emotion in many viewers, especially like this piece. Oh, I had that little puppy, it's a lot of, it really jars their memory. But it's just a proportion. It's like these little Roman busts of these guys. So I probably did about 20, 25 of these guys. So here's a selection of them. A lot of fun to paint these guys. Here's Meanwhile at the KFC laboratories. Just having fun with the idea of taking a lighthearted look at a somewhat serious issue, the idea of food manipulation, genetic manipulation, steroids in our food, all that stuff. I mean, who knows what they're doing at KFC to keep those chickens so big. Here's Fleet. I've done a number of paintings where I'll repeat the figures. It's really easy to do that, right? Because they're mass-produced figures, so you can repeat them, much in the same way that Andy Warhol repeated his soup cans. I also think of Donald Judd and the minimalist sculptors, so they would repeat those steel boxes. So I wanted to play with that. Also playing with perspective a little bit here. Instead of, if I were to arrange the planes in traditional one-point perspective, the right and left planes would have to be put at a different angle, right, to accommodate for the vanishing point. Instead, I just repeat the image exactly the same. I think it gives the image a stronger rhythm, a stronger unity. And I think we were talking about triadic color formats. Here's the strongest triadic color format of them all, the primaries. And that background color is something that I love to play with, that subtle turquoisey blue. It feels like you can just dive into that color in the background. Oz. This is the painting. I got really involved, a lot of time, but it was a lot of fun. I hung the disco ball up. I'm like, all right, I'm going to paint this thing. As I sat down to look at it, I realized I had to clean up my studio to make the reflection a little bit more accessible and readable. So I have the top hat guy, kind of representing the wizard, and he's hiding behind his great illusion there. This multifaceted mirror ball. But there's also a reverse of that going on, because the reflection is me in my studio painting. So I'm, in a way, it's showing me hiding behind the plastic figures that I use to create narratives and create paintings. It's like hiding both ways. Here's a detail. I went ahead and made up the figures that would fit neatly into each little panel. Figured it could be possible. And that's a big part of my work as well. There's certain things that I'll do, like augment or change value structures in certain forms, because I know it could be that way. I'm not super concerned with what's going on exactly in reality. I'll change it up to fit the needs of the painting. Here's On With Stupid. I had this with a show called Civic Minded back in 2006. This is back during the, I know many of you are pretty young, but George W. Bush had his debacle of a war in Iraq going on. And yeah, he was every bit as bad as Trump was, and we're just all crazy about it. And now we see it's even worse. And so it seems like this painting becomes more pertinent again, especially after what's-his-name's election. My thought was, replace the Statue of Liberty with this. Maybe a bit more appropriate at this point. Prowler, this was the largest painting I had done. I recently did a commission that was a little larger, but this is a large painting on canvas. And this was the first painting in which I incorporated photography. So at the beginning, everything was done from life. I tried using a photograph, but that was before digital photography, so you actually had to know how to use a camera, so it wasn't as easy as just pushing the button like it is now. But I got a hold of one of those SLR cameras and found that it was quite useful, and I've been using photography ever since. And it becomes a very valuable tool. It really speeds up the drawing process especially. Buddha with Slinky Aura. This was one of my more ambitious paintings. I like the juxtaposition of ideas of enlightenment contained within the Buddha against the industrial era toy of the Slinky. I mean, the way it plays out into that semicircle, it creates the tines and look like some sort of energy field. So it was a fun little play. But I think it's that play between spirituality and I guess with the matter-of-factness of industrial era technology is kind of fun. And plus, it's just a simple toy, right? And then there's that too. I think we've all been fascinated with this. I think we all had a chance to play with the slinky and walk it down the stairs. It's fun to watch that thing, slither down the stairs. And it was a difficult painting. I remember I was working from a photograph, but I had to end up working in quadrants and numbering my canvas and numbering the photograph because I would get lost in these tines. And trying to figure out how to paint them correctly, how to organize it. That's a big part of a lot of my work, whether it's the trophies or whether it's the slinky here. How do I organize the information that I'm seeing in the photograph to create a coherent painting? So there's that transposition is very exciting for me and very interesting. How do I think it's the same thing, a similar process that goes on with idealizing figures, right? You try to find a more perfect manifestation of reality. La Parole du Sauvage, The Call of the Wild in French. I put the title in French because these were French toys that were given to me by my neighbor, and they were really fun to paint. It was probably one of the most fun paintings I've ever done. Just rolled off the brush. And it was the perfect sheen, too. It was like these colors were so solid and so juicy. It made me think of the possibility of maybe trying to invent my own figures, like invent the forms and just paint them. I haven't taken the plunge yet, but these figures made me think of that possibility. It made me think of where the wild things are too, the playful beasts of that children's book. POW, I collect anything plastic, so I thought, wait, models are plastic, I should try to paint that. And it ended up being challenging, but a lot of fun. Here the soldier is still attached to the tree, so it becomes a contemporary crucifixion. I painted the figure in lifelike colors to an attempt to humanize him, right? To make sure we're thinking of him as a human being. I extended the model tree off all four sides of the picture plane to get at the idea that this is a continuing thing. It just keeps getting stamped out over and over and over, and using the red color to hint at violence and blood and that type of stuff. I painted the scarf blue as a way of showing innocence. And like the crucifixions of old, I flanked it with two figures. Back in the Flemish days, you'd see the crucifixion flanked by Adam and Eve figure. Here I've flanked them with two general figures, one with the hand in his pocket, titled "Where the Bleep Are My Tank Keys," and the other one with the book is "The Man with the Plan," and that's going back to again that debacle of a war in Iraq at the time. Just went on and on. The no-bid contracts for Halliburton, it was really a controversial mess, and it's still going on. It's still to this day. Soaps. I did a show in New York in 2008 called Fresh. The idea of soaps occurred to me particularly for this painting. I thought about the relationship of soap to heaven, to religion. Ideas of like cleanliness is next to godliness, that type of thing. And I arranged I think I've got a few of these soap paintings I'll show you, and they're arranged on that subtly reflective white surface to speak towards ideas of cleanliness and purity. But here it aids in creating sort of a crucifixion, or cruciform, right there with caress being that fleshy color is like a human head. And it was the names of the soaps fit perfectly into the idea of heaven, right? Caress, the soothing idea of heaven, safeguard, your protection of your soul, something like that. Dove, the bird of peace. Lava included to speak towards ideas of the earth. So it's like all these ideas of religion are still earthbound, rooted in the earth. So the idea of lava fits into that, and also the dark green, earthy color fits into that too, while the other pastels seem a little bit more beyond. And here's a detail. A lot of fun with the text in that. I would actually paint the text first in a slightly darker tone, and then put the value structures over that. And I think it's like the ideas of the triad are kind of located in that center piece a little bit there. I think it's the green, orange, and blue. And yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, I mixed up like 25 gradation steps to create the forms in that. And it became sometimes I couldn't even tell the difference myself on the palette, and I would have to remix them because I'd get lost. And here's Camé. The first one was done from life. The heaven was done from life. This one I took a photograph, and I used that as the drawing tool. And here I'm just really interested in composing more than anything, just like the joy of painting and using these luscious pastel colors. And the names of the soaps kind of fit in with that whole idea, honeysuckle, and the French words in there. The kind of the camé, the little profile in there. And the bird there, the balancing of the dove bar on the corner of a bar was a recurring motif, which gave a little bit of tension to the piece, right? So it's like it could fall over. I wanted to have that feeling there. And here's Palmolive. So I'm playing with like the Camé was the blue period. I mean, the Camé was the rose period. Palmolive was a blue period. A little homage to Picasso in there. With this painting, I started talking about the drawing process for creating these things. I actually started taking the soaps to Kinko's, and I would just photocopy the soaps directly on the glass, and that kind of became the drawing. And I would just do different sizes, and I kind of mess with them and arrange them. And this, I think, really inspired by artist William Bailey. If you haven't heard of him, the artist from the 70s. Someone mentioned that to me, one of my colleagues. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think he was. I think of him as being a really big influence now. It's that hard-edged geometry, the precise composing, all that I think plays into my work pretty directly. And then my dealer talked about Morandi. Morandi had a big retrospective at the Met when I had my show, so he was like, "Come look at these soaps. They're like Morandi." So I think there's what Morandi would do. I mean, I'm rearranging the soaps, creating new compositions. Morandi is the same way. He would rearrange these bottles and these objects, and that occupied his entire life. He's just searching for like the perfect composition. And I thought of these pastel soaps as kind of my own personal Rococo era with the pastel colors. So I did a painting called Fragonard, playing with the aristocrat porcelain figures. And I found this soap, this green soap, I don't know if you can see it up there, it says French Retro, so it's fun. Lavender, the color, the idea of that pastel-y color. The bee speaks towards the amorous intentions of a lot of Fragonard's work. If you get to New York, go to the Frick, make sure you go in the Fragonard room, and you'll be overwhelmed by pastel greens and purples, and it's over the top. You should rent that out to like a rave or something. I think that'd be cool. This was a commission. These next three paintings were commissions that I got through my gallery for Kirkland and Ellis. And it was good. It was a great opportunity. I'm calling it captains of industry. For me, it was ironic because the use of the superhero in these compositions makes a nod towards how powerful a lot of these CEOs and whatnot are, but they don't always seem to be working for the common good. They don't seem to be heroic. Here I've got the tugboat, the working man featured prominently in the tugboat, the idea of the worker, tugs the economy along. The ring stacking, the ring stacker, for me, talks about public art, large installations art, and the subtle reflection of the things actually, for me, related directly to the bean in Chicago, where I'm from. Anish Kapoor's public sculpture. Of course, dump truck talks about waste. Here's a little detail. Peeking out. Here's the flash. Submarine. That's like one of the most powerful objects of transportation, I think. Airlines. The Rubik's Cube. For me, it signifies that we have a problem here, that type of thing. Problem to solve. Here's a detail of the Rubik's Cube. Had a lot of fun with these shadows. They were shot underneath, I photographed them under a fluorescent light, so that strange, complex shadow play was a lot of fun to work into the compositions. And there's Wonder Woman. The shape sorting toy, I thought was a perfect metaphor for information systems, computers, that type of thing. The little sand toy speaks towards energy, windmills, and that type of stuff. I thought of the helicopter as like a vanity transportation, corporate helicopters going from building to building. Here's a detail. In 2010, I had a show at Linda Warren Projects in Chicago called Apocalypse, and this was kind of the opening piece for that. And if you remember, the Mayan calendar was coming to an end in 2012, and it was supposed to signify the end of the world. So I was playing off that fear. I didn't think things were going to end, no matter how much I'd hoped. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like it's got like a rock and roll feel, putting the skull on there. I think it's fun. It was almost like a tattoo design. These totem pole figures got from Uncle Fun. I mentioned that earlier. Great store again. Sorry, that's so sad that they're gone. But those forms were a lot of fun to paint. And I would change the color in there. That's something I also do a lot more. I'm doing more and more is just taking objects and kind of altering the color as I see fit. And here's a more involved POW2, just a bigger version. The two heads are upside down with one of the mouth is open, so it's about that logo, right, for acting, the tragic comedy logo. And it's even more horrible because the more disembodied parts here. Global warming, would someone please take this problem seriously? This is a bit of self-critique. I'll often get the criticism about political art not being effective, and I'm totally aware of that. I understand that art doesn't reach enough people. It doesn't really facilitate change. I don't know if did Guernica facilitate any change? I think it's just you react to what's going on around you. Plus, it was an irresistible bit of humor there, because the scientists would talk about the idea of cow flatulence as being a major contributor to greenhouse gases, which is kind of interesting. It was a lot of fun painting the calligraphy on the printing on there. I felt like I was doing calligraphy, and the cow toy was. I did a lot of searching to find the right iconic look. That Holstein had that right iconic look. And the little bell on there, I think, was perfect for it's like it's sounding a warning. Also, here's the cast shadow of the whoopee cushion, if you think about it, is really impossible. So that's something where I'm just inventing something to fulfill the composition. 2012 had a show in New York called American Metal, going back to the trophy motifs, where I'd use series of trophies kind of representing different aspects of the capitalist economy. Here we have the romanticized, rugged American West. Muybridge Rodeo Species Switcheroo, that was kind of the original concept I had, playing with the idea of Edward Muybridge, the photographer who studied animal locomotion. So I had the horse changing into a bull. In my mind, I was thinking of animal cloning and genetic mutations and stuff like that. But I think it becomes a nice metaphor for that idea of the romanticized American West. And it's a lot of fun painting the reflections. Here I've got cheerleaders, maybe are a little bit over obsessed with sports, that type of stuff. And the details, incorporating my self-portrait throughout, kind of almost like a reverse voyeurism. I'm like peering out at the viewer. And again, acknowledging my participation in these things that I'm critiquing. So I don't want anyone to think I'm innocent. And some other bits of the self-portrait reflection. Those are a lot of fun to paint, within that. Within the tight rendering, I get to do my own little painterly thing with the self-portraits. Bubblicious. Kind of trying to subvert the idea of the heroic image, self-image we have of our country with the pink. Knievel, I don't know if you guys remember Evel Knievel. As he transcended generations, he was a huge phenomenon when I was a kid. He's a stuntman, daredevil. This typifies, I think, our love of gasoline and motors and the whole idea of being daring. Like that gesture of the raised fist, I thought fit in well with this series. It's also the idea of the colors too are like minimalist, right? I didn't have any installation shots because I'd like to compare it to like an artist like Kelly, Ellsworth Kelly. Yeah, he would do these minimalist, large minimalist paintings. And they kind of felt like that, but I pasted a trophy on each one of them. Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Here's Cop. Back then I was thinking of surveillance and stuff like that. Now it's even gets more sinister. I still wonder what the Cop trophy is for. Is it for most parking tickets? I'm not sure what the Cop trophy is for. And baseball, cropped it. Which further animates the trophies. It gives them more opportunities to be a little bit more narrative. The spirograph I did a show in 2014 called Enlightened with a question mark. And the spirograph seemed like a really good metaphor for ideas of enlightenment. I was thinking of the age of enlightenment in the 1700s, guys like Immanuel Kant. The founding fathers thought that reason would save humanity. I guess things have gotten a little better. I know it's still pretty crazy. Put it in that circle within the square, gives it a nice minimalist presence. It gets kind of mysterious, kind of floating there. And the holes are arranged in the golden spiral. If you're familiar with the golden mean, is a ratio that was used by the ancient Greeks. And here's some other images of another one. Here's a detail. A lot of fun capturing that translucence and getting into the subtle reflectivity of the numbers. Made me think of the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. So it became like this monolith that would appear at different eras of human development. Blinded by the light. Yeah, just lit the figure from behind and then makes it look like the spirograph is generating its own light source. This was the first painting, Enlightenment. Ironic, the idea of the white horse coming in to save the day. That was my thought. But it's also formal exploration. I really like the pastel colors and the luminous quality of the spirograph and all that too. Did some 3D printing. Thought that was befitting the show. Not great images of this. My idea is ultimately I want a big bronze one, but I had to settle for this 6-inch model. Had it etched on a monolith in acrylic. Detail of that. I'm going to have to speed through these last ones. Laser cut, the nice multicolored spirographs. Heaven, Rubik's Cube with all white stickers. And silver point, metal point spirograph. So I actually took the tool and coated paper in the old Renaissance technique of metal point, if you're familiar with that. Very interesting technique. This is how Da Vinci would do the spirographs. He'd take the tool and do the silver point things. Also had Nike with slit skirt. Here the reflections kind of got stretched and distorted. I'm kind of thinking of The Scream by Munch and the little tragic comedy there. Also made me think of Michelangelo's flayed self-portrait in The Last Judgment. I also had figures of Confucius, which fit in with the ideas of enlightenment. He was the great teacher of morals. Big crackerjack Shiva. Impending apocalypse is another theme that seems to run through my work, is the idea of apocalypse. Disney drone. Citizen, please return to your parents' basement. NSA, well, people just crammed into that. I think the most recent Facebook thing, I think, is a great example of this. But we were very much worried back then about, still accumulating data about us. Then I started doing mandalas. These were for a kid's room. So I had a lot of fun with the simple symbolism there. So I had the Wonder Woman and the Captain America figure. Got the frogs and the butterflies there. Then I did this large Lone Ranger mandala. This got a lot of symbolism in there. Gave Hitler a black eye. The devil's got his eye plucked out. So a lot of different things like that. Here's a few details. Sorry, got to run through these. I had too many images. Here's a dancer kind of running the whole wheel around. Special police, it was all about the ascendancy of America as a sole superpower after World War II. That was the idea of that. And also the idea of mandala as a spiritual teaching tool, because our role in World War II is really the bedrock of our goodness. There's a few things for recent paintings. Ferrigno, the Hulk, green. Ken Hedpow, boom. Kicking the guy's head. First time I used tape. Vacation trophies for vacations for the upper class. I'd like to talk about class a little bit, some of the part and parcel. Took the trophy outside to do steeplechase, kind of an experiment. Allegory concerning the impossibility of enlightenment. Egos wobble, but they don't fall down. And I love humanity this much. This is the first painting I did after Trump got elected, because I love humanity this much. Thank you.